All right, welcome again, everyone, to another Bluelight workshop. I'm Brendan from Bluelight. You're all community members, part of the Facebook group, the Bluelight Facebook group. If by chance you've watched this because you're watching this because you saw a link on the Bluelight page, it may be that you're not aware of the fact that there is a Bluelight Police Recruitment Facebook group. So if you're watching this on the replay, especially check the links below, and you'll be able to find out how to join that group. Almost 20,000 members of that group, and what we've got this evening is some of those members. So you're all very, very welcome to this workshop. What we're going to do in this workshop is we're not going to do introductions or anything like that because we're only here for an hour. But what I will do in a moment is I'll ask you what sort of problems, what sort of conundrums, what sort of things you're struggling with, and what sort of questions do you have. And I'll list what those are. We'll come up with several. I'll see how they all connect together, and then we'll work through them. And I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. I don't want to be doing too much talking because I've just finished running a 2 hour, no, it was about 2 hours and 15 minutes webinar for people who are preparing for the online assessment centre. It was the end of course number 7. We've just practiced the briefing exercise for the online assessment centre, the noisy party exercise. We've just practiced that. So a lot of talking. So I'm not sure, it'd be great if you could do some of the talking as well. If we could talk through some of the problems, discuss some of those problems. Because at the moment, I'm sort of workshopped out. But anyway, I'll keep going. It's all part of the working day. It's all good. So the other thing to mention is that we just sort of respect each other, value each other's opinion. No one's ever got into arguments or anything like that before, but it's just to sort of highlight that, you know, if someone's got an opinion that you don't agree with, hey, respect it. As long as it's not against the law, or it's not someone saying, hey, I don't see why I'm not allowed to join the police being a member of the British National Party. I've been a signed up member of the BNP and the EDL for the past 20 years. You think I'm going to change my racist beliefs to join the police? Yeah, if someone's as extreme as that, then I'm going to have words. But I've never experienced, actually, no, I have experienced that. Once when I ran a training course for the Certificate of Knowledge in Policing, we had someone who just kept going on about the travelling community. Eventually, we had to release him from the course and get in touch with this force that he was applying to because he just had the wrong attitude. All right, so let's look at what questions we have. So what conundrums, what questions, what problems do you want to discuss this evening? Just raise your hand and I'll invite you to unmute yourself and share. So Josh is first. Josh has hand up, and we've got a hand up from Elise, but let's start with Josh.
Yeah, hi Brendan, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Yes, Josh, thank you.
On the Facebook group, I've noticed a lot of people saying for the stage 3 briefing that they end up sort of repeating themselves quite a lot because obviously now it doesn't develop as much. I was sort of wondering, I'm pretty comfortable with all like the models and that kind of stuff, but is it worth like withholding a little bit for the next questions, or do I just go all in and at the start?
Okay, that's a good question. All right, I've just written that down. We'll go through that one. Lovely, thanks, Josh. And then over to Elise.
Hi. So I passed my assessment centre and I'm waiting for my final interview. I guess just the differences between the competency-based interview in the assessment centre and the enforced interview. What are like the main differences?
The differences. So you broke up a little bit there, but I got that you're looking at what's the difference between the online assessment centre interview and the force interview. And which force is it, if you don't mind me asking?
It's South Yorkshire Police.
South Yorkshire. Okay. All right, great, lovely. Thanks, Elise. And what else have we got? So there's, it says Erin, but I'm guessing the F is for your surname. I guess it's guessing it's Erin.
Yeah, so I've looked at a couple of videos and stuff like that. I've got my assessment centre coming up, and I was just wondering if you could maybe clear up the actual structure of like the decision-making models and things like that we'd use for the written and briefing, and if if they're the same, because I know there's a couple models, like which sort of one's best to use, that sort of thing.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Erin. We can do that. Do you say for the briefing?
Yeah, or the written, like if there's, you know, I'm basically I sort of know the models, but also I'm a bit confused where to put them in, sort of thing.
Okay, so yeah, there's all sorts of models where you use them. All right, great. Models and templates. We love them. Okay, thanks, Erin. Any other questions? Anything else? Any other conundrums, questions, not sure about? No? All right. Oh, there's one. So Alice.
Hiya. Yeah, just quickly, I've got my bolt-on assessment for the Met coming up, and I've like watched a few videos as well on kind of the structure and models and things you can use. I was just a little bit confused about in the II March structure with the kind of method bit and the intention phase, kind of where to put the building blocks of detective work in, like which section would be best to put that in, and yeah, just kind of a bit more detail about those, whether the intention phase, because I know that's where you outline like your aims, but whether that should just be maybe like one or two sentences, or whether that's the bit you go into detail, or is that more the kind of methods?
Right. Great. And is this you actually, Alice, it sounds like you've got a level of detail that's making me think you might be on my online course.
I'm actually not. No, it's a bit of a last minute thing. I just discovered you. I've actually got my assessment tomorrow. So.
All right. So you've picked it up just from watching my videos. Good.
Yeah.
Goodness. So you're trying to join the dots there, because yeah, you're trying to join the dots. All right, Alice. Let's see what we can do to answer that question for you.
Thank you.
Wow, that's a fair bit of stuff. That. So if there's anything else, if we can squeeze anything else in over the next hour, great. So we've got stage 3 briefing stuff, difference between online assessment centre and final interviews. Again, briefing and written stuff for the stage 3, and also something from Alice around the bolt-on for the Met. Anyone else going for the Met, the detective bolt-on? No? All right, let's get that out of the way then, Alice, for yourself. So for everyone, it's just out of interest for you. So every Home Office force in England and Wales, you have to do the online assessment centre. There's no way around it. You've got to do the online assessment centre. Oh, before I start though, some people might be thinking, "Hey, who is this guy? Why should I listen to him?" Just a little bit for those of you who don't know me. As a police officer for 28 years, I developed an interest in coaching and supporting people for promotion boards and specialist interviews 26 years ago. That's when I first started coaching and supporting some of my colleagues. Retired 8 years ago, but I'd already set up Bluelight 10 years ago. So for the past 10 years, I've been helping people to succeed in the police recruitment process. So there's about 12,000 people now. It's a bit of a conservative estimate, but there's a good 12,000 are in the police as a result of my support. So from forces from Northern Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales, all the non-Home Office forces. And there's probably a good smattering of people from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United States who've succeeded as a result of some of my support. So there's not really a police recruitment problem I've not come across. And I'm pretty much aware of how it all works from force to force, although forces do seem to change the way they do things on a regular basis. So that's why you should listen to me, to be honest. If you do find anyone who you think, wow, this person knows as much as Brendan, will you please let me know who they are? Because I'd love to meet them. We could just geek out for hours on police recruitment stuff. But until I meet that person, I'm going to put it out there. I don't think there's anyone else out there who knows as much about police recruitment as my good self. So II March and the bolt-on. So the online assessment centre is something that everyone in England and Wales has got to do. If you're applying to a Home Office force, you've just got to do it. You've got to get it out of the way. As we're going to discuss in a moment, it's very formulaic. It's very tick box. I think it's a dreadful assessment instrument because what it means is for some forces, you can actually join the police without actually talking to a human being. So for the Met Police, if you want to be a constable, you do the online assessment centre, and then the next stage is your fitness and medical, and they put you through 2 role plays. But I'm not aware of anyone who's failed those role plays, or if there are people they've not declared it. I'm sure some people do fail it, but that's it. No questions about your motivation, no questions about what's inspired you to be a police officer, no questions about your values, nothing. So I think the online assessment centre is a very poor assessment instrument to determine whether you're going to join the police. For some forces, there's nothing else. For Avon and Somerset Police, West Midlands Police, currently Merseyside Police, Thames Valley Police. I think there's a smattering of, I think it's Dorset. I think there's a couple of more forces as well. You don't have to do anything after the online assessment centre, nothing except your fitness and medical. What that means, though, is that forces can choose to do nothing more, which means you can join the police without talking to anyone, which I think is insane. But it doesn't matter what I think. Or forces can add things on. And this is where sometimes people say things like, so, like Elise has said, what's the difference between the interview for the final interview and the online assessment centre? There's going to be a big it depends here, because it depends on the force. So what the Met have decided to do for detective candidates is, as opposed to putting them through an interview, which is what they used to do, they used to put them through an interview, an in-tray exercise, and a briefing exercise. Now they just do the in-tray exercise and the briefing exercise. I don't know why they've got rid of the interview. I really don't know. So what Alice is going to have to do is a briefing, where one of the scenarios I use in the online course for the interview course is a serious violent assault. And I think one of my YouTube videos actually alludes to that. Is that right, Alice? Yeah, I talk about an assault on Waverley Drive at the junction with YouTube Park Road. I can remember that because I used to live on Waverley Drive, and YouTube Park Road was the road at the junction. So it comes easy to me. I always use roads and names of things from my past. It makes it easier for me to remember. So to give you a load of detail about that incident, and you've got to do a briefing, a 10-minute briefing to, now in the past it's been a detective sergeant or a detective inspector and someone from HR. Recently, one of my one-to-one clients last week did it, and he said I completely nailed it. He contacted me straight after and said, I've nailed it. I thought, that's confident. Anyway, one day later, he messaged me to say, yeah, I told you I nailed it, I passed it. But what he said was interesting. He said that the 2 people who interviewed me, who listened to my briefing, weren't serving police officers and had never been serving police officers. So I thought that was an interesting development, because what they actually said to him, they gave him feedback to say, actually, some of the things you've discussed with us, we're not aware of them. So some of the things he discussed in the briefing, some of the things I highlight that you need to talk about, they'd not even heard of it. So he just completely blew them away. And I think it was things like the building blocks of a criminal investigation, and going into things like an FS strategy, or looking at how you would avoid cross-contamination, Locard's principle, every contact leaves a trace, and a pile of other stuff as well, like communication strategy, and all of the sort of things that, unless if you don't know about those things, you won't know about those things. You'd only know about those things because you've worked with me, or you've watched some of my videos, or gone through my worksheets. So II March is I love templates, I love models, I love structured ways of dealing with things. And this is how I did things as a police officer. If you go to an incident, there's a template for it. There's a way of dealing with it. Plane falls out of the sky, there's a way of dealing with it. One of your officers comes across, I think the last murder I dealt with was a load of, with someone who'd been hacked to bits and all his body parts were in a bath. It sounds gruesome and gory, but deal with it the same way. There's a template, there's a model, there's a structured way of dealing with things. So in exactly the same way, there's a template, there's a model, there's a structure to dealing with everything in the online assessment centre, everything in your final interview, and everything in your briefing, Alice. So II March stands for information, intention, method, administration, risk assessment, communication, and health and safety, or human rights. It's worded as both. I like to include them both. So in the information phase, what you'd be talking about is, what do we know? So talk about what we know, and then talk about what we don't know. The things that we don't know then become lines of inquiry. Your intention phase is where you talk about, so my aim is to ensure that all the following aspects of this criminal investigation are covered. And you just go through the building blocks of any criminal investigation. So you don't need to talk much about what you're actually going to do and how you're going to do it in the intention phase. The intention phase is for, it doesn't matter what the crime is, it's going to be pretty much the same all the time. You're going to secure and preserve life. You are going to ensure the safety of the victim and the witnesses. You're going to secure and preserve the scene. You're going to ensure that any evidence from the scene is secured and is secured forensically as evidence. You're going to seek out any further victims and witnesses and secure witness statements from them. And the very last stage is to secure the early arrest of the offender. So those are your building blocks of any criminal investigation. And for those of you watching thinking, that's interesting, arresting the offenders at the end. Well, the reason why arresting the offender is at the end is because if you arrest the offender and you've not got witness statements, you've not got your evidence lined up, you've not got the scene secured yet, then you've got nothing to put to them. You've not got any evidence to put to them. We can only arrest someone for certain reasons. One is so they can be charged for the offence they've been arrested for, so we can detain them for that purpose. The other reason why we can detain someone at a police station once they've been arrested is to secure and preserve evidence. So it may be that you've had to arrest them because they're right in front of you. So it's not to say that you're going to say, I'm not going to arrest you yet because we've not got all the evidence yet. If they're right in front of you, and sometimes they do return to the scene. On 2 occasions in my career, the criminal actually has returned to the scene. I know it sounds cliched, but I can still remember one of them. One of my colleagues got really severely assaulted during a traffic stop. The offender ran away. We secured the scene because there was blood there. And this Muppet actually came back and he started asking me questions about what's happened here, boss. And I was thinking, you match the description, you do. So just locked him up, got him cuffed straight away. This is back in 1987, and it was him. It was the offender. He'd come back to the scene. So cliched idiots sometimes do that. So it's not to say that we're not going to, if the opportunity presents itself, we are going to arrest the offender. But our preference is to get all our ducks lined up, get all our evidence secured, because the only other reason why you can keep someone at a police station is to secure evidence by questioning. So those are the only 3 reasons really why you can keep someone at the police station. So you need to bear that in mind, Alice, with your investigative plan. And it's the method phase is where you're talking about your investigative plan. Basically, how you're following up on all your lines of inquiry. All your lines of inquiry become part of your investigative plan. Does that make sense? I'm giving you a massive gift there. That's like half my online course.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Actually, it's not. It's nothing like half of it. It's about 2% of it, or something like that. But hey, you've got your thing tomorrow, and I bet if you'd come across me a lot earlier, you would have probably just gone, actually, I'm all in. I'm going to do this course.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I hope you do well tomorrow. I never like to wish anyone luck. I always like to wish people good practice and preparation, but you've not got much time. I always think, it's actually my daughter when she was 11, when she was going on stage. She's now 13, but she likes theatre, musical theatre. And before she did musical theatre, she liked to do plays when she was 11. And I wished her luck once, and she turned around and just said, Daddy, I don't need luck. If I needed luck, it would have meant I've not practiced and prepared enough. And I thought, wow, where did that come from, 11-year-old daughter? And I love that. I still love it. So I never wish anyone luck, because if you need luck, you've not done enough practice and preparation. So I wish you good practice and preparation in your final hours, Alice, and go and knock them out, because they might not actually be serving police officers. If they are one of the serving police officers, be prepared for them just folding their arms and just going, right, off you go, 10 minutes. And just like a typical detective sergeant or a detective inspector would. And they're going to overload you with information as well. You're going to get absolutely overloaded with information. And there is a bit of an interview after the briefing where they'll ask you questions about your decision-making process. The other advice I'd give you is be bold and decisive. That's not actually feedback. That's not actually my guidance. It's 2 of my clients actually came back in 1 week who I did one-to-one coaching with. Everyone I've done one-to-one coaching with for the detective bolt-on has passed. Everyone so far has passed. One of them passed second time around, but she still passed. But 2 of my clients came back and said, I said, what's the best advice you could give others? And both of them said, be bold and decisive. Don't let them try and mess your head up. You don't let them try and put a seed of doubt because they will do that. They may say things to you, Alice, in your interview. They may say sort of interviews phase. They may say, so that sounds like a lot of officers, that does, Alice. How can you justify using so many officers for this incident? And they're going to push you like that. House-to-house inquiries. That sounds like it's very resource intensive. Or they might ask you the question, so the suspect, what's your opinion of the suspect then? So they're going to ask you lots of questions to push and probe and prod, and they're going to try and get you to wobble on your decision. Stand your ground. If you've made a decision, stand by it, unless they give you new information, in which case, you might want to redirect your decision, but unless they give you new information, stick with your decision. How's that, Alice? Awesome, thank you, good. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Okay, let's move on. So Josh asked about, in the Facebook group, whenever anyone says, has anyone got any advice for, I'm just going to mute everyone actually because someone's unmuted and I can hear a little background noise. There we go. So Josh asked a question about stage 3 briefing in the Facebook group, and I've seen this over and over again, ever since the Online Assessment Centre was introduced 2 years ago as a solution to COVID. They should change it now because we're kind of coming out of COVID, so who knows what's going to come next. What other nonsense from the College of Policing. But whenever it says anything about the stage 3 briefing, even the old version, which was dealing with drug dealers and homeless people, invariably people who've done it would say, I found myself repeating myself a lot. The reason being is you've got this, it's a paper feed actually, and quite honestly, this is what everyone gets on the online course. To get a sample exercise for what's the noisy party. It's currently a noisy party incident, and this is a good old-fashioned paper feed. What I mean by paper feed is it's the sort of stuff that I used to design when I worked for a previous incarnation of the College of Policing back in 1996 to 2000, when I worked for National Police Training as one of the trainers and trainers of trainers. And I used to do some design work for them, curriculum design. And a common training exercise or assessment instrument is a paper feed. And it's where you give people a situation and then you ask them a question and they give you the answer. And that's what this is. It's a paper feed, except it's online. And there's no one there. You're delivering your answers, your 3-minute answers to the questions to some software. There's no one at the other end. And an assessor is going to assess you at a later date. But the problem is you don't know what the next question is going to be. You don't know what the next question is going to be. And you've got 3 minutes to talk. And as my clients just this evening on course 7 have realized as we've practiced this exercise, 3 minutes is actually a long time to talk. It's a long time to talk, 3 minutes. Most of them ran out of steam at about 1 minute 30 or 2 minutes. So if you're really stuck, repeat what you said before. But you shouldn't need to repeat it for a good reason. I'm going to come to that in a moment. So answer the question to your best of your ability. The problem is that the initial scenario is really vague and the questions they're going to ask you are really vague. So, you have to have an idea about what they're looking for, which is why I put together, where is it? A sort of marking guide as well, based on the competencies and values you're being assessed against. So you can, gives you a steer then of the sort of things that you should be actually talking about. So they're going to ask you sub-questions as well, which will be helpful. So like the first question here is, what's your initial thoughts on the above scenario? What more would you want to find out? What information would you want to gather? Where would you consider getting that information, and how would you go about gathering this information? So that's all about talking in your 3-minute answer about what do we know and what don't we know, and then creating topics out of the actual issue itself. So you've got topics which are the noisy party, the neighbours, and also who else is in a position to give you information, the communications room, and also your own observations. So you'll be able to fill your 3 minutes with how you're going to get information from each one of those sources using 5WH and building up a picture of what's actually going on. Now, it may be that another question later on kind of alludes to the same thing, and you find yourself repeating yourself a little bit. But the difference being is that when they update the scenario, it's the same scenario that you're dealing with. It's not a separate scenario, but they've updated it and introduced new topics. So in the exercise here, in the update development of scenario in part 2, we discovered that the parents aren't contactable. We discovered there's social media being used. We discovered there's some young people turning up for the party who are drunk, who you stop on the street. We find out that there's some, one of the local residents is starting to get a little bit frustrated and demonstrates some anxiety, and that frustration could turn into a public order type situation. So each one of those things is a topic that you can expand on. So just think about everything they give you, break it into little topics and expand on them. And so Josh, you're not expanding on the old information. You're not repeating yourself in respect of the old information. You're talking about the new information and going into extreme detail about how you would approach that new information. Hopefully that's making sense. Josh, is that making sense?
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Yeah, so, and that's how you deal with it. That's how you deal with the stage 3. Well, not all the stage 3, because I'm going to move now into what Erin said. So let's move to, where's Erin? There she is. Just making sure she's still with us. I had someone on one of these workshops posed a question and then left. So I'm not answering that question for you. Gone. Different structures and models. Okay, so the written exercise is long-term problem solving. The briefing exercise is about something that's happening in the here and now. So there's all sorts of different models we can utilize. So everything else, as opposed to just gathering information about the actual incident, you might be asked questions about how would you go about, I don't know, engaging with the neighbours at the briefing. And so there's various different models you can utilize. 2 of them that just spring to mind are Kutsa. This is where you confront the issue, tell people really clearly why you're there and what you're hoping to achieve. The understanding phase is asking lots of questions about the problem. So using 5WH, using it in a simple to complex way, using a big open question, which is always, please, can you explain to me exactly what happened, what has happened here? And you go into that kind of detail about these are the sort of questions I'd utilize. Now, these are open questions because open questions are designed to gather information from people. And then you define and summarize things back to them. This is a Kutsa model that demonstrates that you're listening. And then you seek solutions. You see what the players in the incident can provide as possible solutions, what they're looking for as outcomes. And then if they come up with nothing, you can provide solutions, possible solutions for them, different options, allow them to choose the best option for their circumstances. And then we'll talk about how we're going to assess and monitor the delivery of that solution and what we hope the result would be. So that's the Kutsa model. A simpler one could be just morphing the 4 E's from COVID, which is pretty similar to the 5-stage appeals process. But I'm not going to go into the 5-stage appeals process, but the 4 E's is like a simpler version, easier to remember. You just engage with people, you try and explain what's going on and what impact they're having on others, and then you would encourage them to do what you're asking them to do. And only when it's absolutely necessary, reasonable to do so and proportionate in the circumstances, would you move on to an enforcement option. So you could use the 4 E's. There's plenty of models that we can utilize. The national decision model gives us a framework for making decisions. When it comes to long-term problem solving, there's an 8-stage intensive engagement process that takes you from less public servant and more enabler of citizens. This is what's got my clients 90+% in their stage 3, because they just sort of use all of these models, all of these structures to pretty much nail it. It just gives them plenty of things to talk about and write about in the written, and plenty of things to talk about in the briefing. The SARA problem solving process, scanning, analysis, response, assessment, bringing in the problem analysis triangle. A lot of this stuff is in the public domain. You know, one or two people, I remember someone about a year ago saying, all Brendan does is he just recycles a load of stuff that's already available. Yeah, but if you don't know what you don't know, you know, then how do you know that there's something called Pat? I mean, Erin, I can bring you in now. Did you know that there's 2 friends of yours called Sarah and Pat that you can use for the written exercise?
Yeah, well, I did know about them, but I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, but if you don't mind, how did you know? How did you discover?
Literally from your stuff before, but I didn't know before then.
There you go. So before then, and that's the thing. If you don't know what you don't know, how do you know that you need to look for a problem-solving model called SARA?
Yeah.
And it's the associated models. Pat is just a problem analysis triangle that we start looking for the causes of the crime or the behaviour. But then you can go even deeper than that, though. So we can start looking at adverse childhood experiences. So, you know, if one of the questions in the written exercise is, what could the possible causes of the behaviour be? If it's young people, then you're just going to go straight into the world of adverse childhood experiences, because you're not wrong. Research tells you that you're right. The 8-stage intensive engagement process is a template that you could use for anything, even if they change the written exercise tomorrow. But if it's a problem in the community, you just use that template and you just drop in the new bits of information. So there's so many models and structures you can utilize, and once you build all of those in to each constituent part of the written or the briefing exercise, equals 90+%. One of my clients about 6 months ago gave me feedback to say he got 96% in his stage 3. 96%, and he said, I still don't know half of what, I still don't understand half of what you were talking about, but all I did was just go in and be a clone of you. That was his approach. I'm just gonna be a clone of you. And he got 96%. And you know, you are also going to discover things that you can't find in the books or in academia. So there's little things like the 4 C's, which is a Brendanism, that when you're forming your working group, you're looking for people in the community who are capable and connected, who are care enough to act and committed to take action. Well, that's a blend of 3 different bits of research that I put together years ago. TPAC is another model that you won't find elsewhere. It's just something that, as a neighbourhood inspector, I always used to make sure that our team did. So if we did any form of enforcement, which is the E of TPAC, we had to do activities that built in trust building, preventative actions, advocacy for the community, and communication. So in everything we did TPAC. So you won't find those things. You won't find those things because those are things that are built on from experience. But anyway, all of that combined equals 96%. That's what we're aiming for. And the reason why you should be aiming for a high score like that is because, Erin, do you mind me asking which force you're going for?
Yeah, it's the Met detective.
Oh, the Met. Oh, right. Well, the Met, it doesn't matter. As long as you pass, no one cares. They're desperate for officers in the Met at the moment. They are. It was in the news the other day. They've got they're only getting half as many applications as they need at this moment in time, and they haven't got a clue why. I can tell you why. It's because the recruitment process is an absolute train wreck for the Met. or you might surprise me, Erin, but my guess is that the comms are really poor. They sometimes send emails saying that we're sorry to hear that you've withdrawn from the process, normally on a Friday evening. And then on Monday morning, you ring up and they go, oh, sorry, we sent it to the wrong people.
It took me 4 months to get like the invite from them saying I'll get through to the assessment centre. So
4 months with no contact in between. Yeah. So, hey, are they surprised they've got an absolute train wreck for a recruitment process? You can ring them up and get what, give them one question one day. If you ring them up, you'll get one answer. Ring them up the next day and pose the same question, you'll get a completely different answer. And if they've all got Welsh accents, the people who you speak to, it's because they're based in Cardiff. They've outsourced all of their recruitment to Penna, who are based in South Wales. So anyway, I've not got much to say that's positive about Met Recruitment. I think it's a great force. I think it's awesome. Once you're actually in, what a brilliant police force it's put. You know, it's really come into its own. It really does need good people because there's still too many scandals tipping out the Met. There's not a day goes by without there being another scandal from the Met. So there's a big culture issue to sort out. But I think that's problematic as well because I think that puts people off. But anyway, you know, try and work with them on the recruitment process. They are mostly hopeless. They are mostly clueless. Their head of recruitment says, and HR says they don't know why. I know why, because about 6 months ago, no, it's about 8 months ago now, in the Facebook group, at the behest of a chief superintendent from the Met, who said, find out what all the problems are and I'll feed them back. And so about 30 of you, or people in the group, came up with these are all my lived experiences of how messed up the Met recruitment process is. And I wrote them all up into a big report for the chief superintendent, this guy called Roy Smith. And he came back to me a week later and said, I'm really sorry, mate, but I can't find anyone who's interested. No one's interested. I'm really sorry. So, yeah, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Get off your soapbox, Brendan. There's a problem. Not all forces are that bad, but I think the Met's probably about the worst. And so for all of you, actually, if you're experiencing a lack of comms, confusing messages, them telling you that you've got your day one coming up and you're thinking, day one? No, it's meant to happen over a week, isn't it? Some of them call it the Search Assessment Centre. All sorts of confusing information, like if you're going for Met Police Constable, once you've done your online assessment centre, they'll invite you to an interview. It's not an interview, it's your medical and fitness, but they say it's an interview. So there's all sorts of confusion knocking around. My advice to all of you is just work with it and just, you know, be nice to them, because even though that most of them are clueless in the HR teams and recruitment teams, and they give you all sorts of duff advice, it's not their fault. They're nice people, they're just clueless about the recruitment process. But also, so I'm going off topic a little bit, but I'm quite passionate about this, is you might have to push a little bit depending on the force that you're in, because you can get forgotten. You might be thinking, how does that happen? Well, for a lot of forces, including the Met, they'll put you in a talent pool, and sometimes they forget about you. And you might be thinking, how does that happen? And I'm thinking, I have no idea how they managed to do that, but they've lost your files. You're still in the talent pool, but we forgot. No, we misplaced your file. All sorts of other messed up stuff. But keep on top of them. If you don't hear from them within a month, then get in touch with them, no matter what force it is. I think it's within your right to do so. I think it's perfectly reasonable to contact them to say, a month has gone by and I've not heard from you. Can I please have an update? Because that's the only way that police recruitment is going to start changing and looking after you. Because at the moment, I don't think there's any forces that do. Unless anyone's going to surprise me in the room. Is anyone in the room who's got a story about how awesome the recruitment process is?
With the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, in my experience anyway, I've literally been contacted probably 3 times every month. I've been given information about every stage. They seem to be the only one doing it. The PSNI have ghosted me now. But yeah, apart from that, the CNC have been on it. I know it's not like traditional policing, but they've done really well, I think.
Yeah, the CNC, they've got a really good, oh God, what's her name now? The assistant chief, I've done some work with her when she was the superintendent. Her name escapes me, but we've got really awesome, go on, what's her name? The ACC in CNC?
I can't remember. I'm too wrapped up in doing the OEC at the moment. It's
All
just,
right.
yeah.
Come on, know your force. Know your force. Louise was the name. Louise. She shook it up a little bit because she's absolutely awesome. She came from Merseyside Police. She got promoted from superintendent to assistant chief constable in CNC. And when she arrived, she really shook it up, and I'm glad she did. And she's really into, no, we've got to look after people on this journey. From the moment they apply, we've got to look after them and nurture them and help them through the process whenever we can, and keep in touch with them, because if we don't, we'll lose them. We'll lose them. So that's good to hear. Next time I see her, or I won't bump into her, but if I'm ever in touch with Louise, I'll feed it back to her to say that CNC is doing good. But it should be every force. Anyway, Erin, is that enough structures and models and things for you? She's like, no, stop, Brendan.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
No more, stop.
So you just like weave them into your, like, start with like the 5 Ws and stuff like that, and then weave them in when you're actually getting to those points.
Yeah, well, it's what we do in the like in tonight's webinar. We actually practice weaving it all in, you know. And the way we do it is I get the clients to actually answer the question, and then we debrief it, and then we look at how we could reorganize it, how we could drop that model in. Basically, what it turns into is just lots of chunks of template, you know, chunks of things that you can say and do and write. And the great thing about the written exercise, although the College of Policing makes it clear that you can't take any guidance in with you or any pre-prepared notes into your stage 3, or actually any part of it. For your stage 3 written, there's no camera on you, and you can make notes, and you can make notes in the stage 3 briefing as well. In the 10-minute briefing, 10-minute phase at the very, very beginning, you can make notes. And most people like to make notes on things like that, don't they? Yeah, I'm a bit of a weirdo. I make notes on things that look like that. So I'll just park that there for you. So you can make notes, and you can use the notes that you make during the exercise. So you've got all of these templates in your head, haven't you, that you can just sort of copy and paste into your exercise that you're doing, or copy and paste from your head to your mouth and just do that stuff in the briefing. All right, okay, so that's Erin's question done, Alice done, Josh, we've done. Elise, what's the difference between the online assessment centre and the final interview? Elise, I think the best way of answering this is to say that the online assessment centre, have you done the online assessment centre? Have you got through that bit? Yeah. It's really formulaic. They ask the question, they give you some bullet points as to what to include. Just use the structured approach that, you know, I use a structured approach which looks at situation impact, aim and options, what your actions, what you did and how you did it, result, and what your learning is. You know, what would you do differently next time? Use that structured approach. Answer the question, and it's not hard to work out what the questions are going to be, because if you tell me what the value or competency is that you're going to be assessed against, which they do, I can predict what the questions are going to be. So you can pre-predict what the questions are going to be. You can work out what an answer is going to be using that structured approach. You know what behaviors you need to hit in those competencies and values. So you know how to weave those into your answer. You're just applying a formula. You're just ticking boxes. The person who's assessing you is not assessing you in the here and now. They are assessing you remotely because you're uploading your recording to some software. And the person who's assessing you has probably never been in the police before. I know some of you might find that quite shocking, but I did work before COVID in the organisational development unit at the College of Policing for a few years. It was really interesting. And some of the people who did some of the work in the OD team were actually assessors for the assessment centre. And I didn't meet one of them who was a serving officer or has ever had a warrant card in the pocket. They were all people who never been in the police. Bizarrely, they all seem to be like 60 years plus, 60 years old plus. So they might have changed a little bit. They might have more people who have been in the police before, but all they're doing is waiting for you to say certain things so they can go tick, 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 tick. They're probably assessing about 8 to 10 of you every day, and they've been doing that for the past 2 years. They must be bored out their brains by now. And I know from talking to some of them about the assessment work they used to do, they always used to say, it's really boring, it's repetitious, it's boring. I'm just waiting for them to say and do certain things so I can go tick, tick, tick. And it pays rubbish as well. I think the OD unit was paying about £300 a day. The assessors were getting paid about £120 a day. So really, really rubbish pay as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here, Elise, is that the difference is the online assessment centre is tick box, it's formulaic, just deliver what they want you to deliver. And there's no one there to question you. They're not interested in you out. They're not interested in your motivation. They're not interested in what's inspired you to be a police officer. They don't care. You're probably just a distraction to their cheese and biscuits and a glass of wine at 10 o'clock at night once the kids have been put to bed. You know, seriously, they'll have one eye on the cheese and biscuits and another eye on your, and they won't even be watching you. They'll just be listening to you. Tick, tick, tick. They won't rewind it. Why would they rewind it if they think, oh, well, let's listen to that again, see if I've missed anything? Why would they do that? Because they're getting paid per candidate. So if they did that for every candidate, they're only getting paid half as much. So why would they do that? Right, here's the difference, Elise. When you go to South Yorkshire Police for your interview, you're going to be up in front of someone like me, because I used to do the interviews. Not when I was a sergeant. I never did any of that kind of stuff when I was a sergeant. Oh, no, I did actually, a little bit when I worked for National Police Training. But when I became an inspector, I used to do some of the interviews. You'd be up in front of someone like me. And I'll be really nice and pleasant. You know, I'll be helpful. At this point, they're interested in you. At this point, they want you. But they're going to be operational officers, operational sergeants and operational inspectors. You may get a chief inspector. Rarely would you get a superintendent, although every now and then I have heard about a superintendent tipping up to do the interviews. This document here drives me nuts when I see people in a Facebook group says, has anyone got any advice for the interview? Yeah, know your competencies. Know this thing. You can't know that thing. It's got things like that in it. The wheel of confusion. And I'll hear people saying, well, make sure you've got an answer for each competency. Well, that gets confusing as well, because impartiality talks about decision making, transparency talks about decision making, and so does analyze critically. But transparency also talks about, let me just check, recognizing the value of feedback and acting upon it. So don't think it's going to be tell me about a time when you've been transparent. Invariably, it's a question about a difficult decision, but also equally, it could be a decision about when you've had to, when something's not gone to plan and you've had to seek feedback from others about that thing that's not gone to plan. So don't fall into the trap of make sure you've got one answer for each competency and value. And the other thing about these inspectors and sergeants, because I used to be one, is they understand the competency and values framework as much as you do. I know this because I've got another Facebook group and another group that looks at supporting people through weekly workshops for promotion boards and specialist interviews. So I've got sergeants in there and inspectors in there and chief inspectors in there going for promotion. And a lot of them do the interviews. And when I ask them, to what extent do you understand the competency and values framework? They go, I don't understand it neither. So you're being assessed by people who mostly don't understand the competency and values framework, which means that what they're really looking for is you delivering a good, solid answer, delivering an answer to their question. Because if it's a decision-making question, you don't know whether they're assessing you against analyze critically, impartiality, or transparency, or a mix of all of them. What they're really looking for is you delivering a detailed and structured answer that's authentic, that's sharing something about what's in your heart and soul, and that's got some kind of emotional connection as well, that doesn't sound pre-rehearsed, that doesn't sound like whatever question they were going to ask, you were always going to deliver this answer because it's that pre-rehearsed. That it's coming from the heart, that it's conversational, so they can warm to you. So they can warm to you, because the question they're really asking themselves is, can I see Elise on my team at 4 in the morning when everything's going pear-shaped, when the wheel has well and truly come off, and most of my team have been on since 5 o'clock that evening because the afternoon shift was short. They're working a 12 or 14-hour day because some of them came on at 7. Some of the ones at 7 are going to finish at 7, and the ones who came on at 5, they're going to finish at 7 as well, because hard luck, it's one of those nights. Can I see Elise working on my team at that point when she's had no refs except for a half-eaten kebab by a report she's updating on the computer, and the sudden death of a baby comes in at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6-month-old baby, sudden death? Is Elise the one that volunteers, or is Elise the one that goes, well, I'm not going to that? And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who can fit in on their team. And that's why I'd suggest that's the big difference. One's really formulaic. The other one is in front of people who can read you a mile off. You can read you a mile off. So I know there's some books out there that talk about use phrases from the competency and values framework. There's even a book out there that tells you about these are phrases that you can use and basically buzzwords. It's not going to work. You try any of that cliched stuff, buzzword, some serving inspector, they're going to look at you and they're going to repeat back what you've said and said, that sounds really interesting, that. So you worked in a collaborative way to achieve an effective and efficient outcome. Interesting. What do you mean by that? How exactly did you do that? So all those buzzwords are not going to work, because you're not going to fit on their team if you like that. Is anyone in the room a serving special constable or PCSO or anything like that? Anyone in the room cares to admit it? You might not want to admit it. But when I run my webinars, I always ask them, so, you know, anyone that's serving PC or special constable or PCSO, and I'll ask them the question. So your inspector or the inspector you on the team you work with, what's their tolerance level like to cliched buzzword bullshit? Excuse the French. I've not had one that's ever said, oh, they love it. I've never known any, including myself, I've never known any of my fellow interviewers to walk out of a room and just go, do you know, that candidate was brilliant. They knew the competency and values framework inside and out. Amazed me with cliches. The buzzwords were just flowing so beautifully. I can really see them fitting in on my team. It's something none of them have ever said. What they have come out with is they've come out and said, seemed like a very promising candidate. It's just really unfortunate they just spoke such shit and they disrespected me, because I'm giving up my day here to help this force choose the best people, and all this person could do is talk drivel in front of me. So I failed them. Does that make sense, Elise? Yeah. Are you prepared to be your authentic emotional self in a structured and detailed way?
Yeah. Well, when I initially applied, there was 3 questions, and they said you won't be assessed on these until you're in force, and it was, why do you want to join? Why do you think you'd be a good police officer? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they said these won't be assessed until you reach in force interview.
Right. So that's the other difference, is that they, whereas the College of Policing will just ask you, can you tell me about a specific time when? They're going to start off with things like, why do you want to be a police officer? Durham recently went one step further and just said, persuade me that we should employ you as a police officer. I know I can't remember the other force. There's another force just recently just started off with, right, so why you and why now? Why this force? What's the other one, Elise? They're going to ask you, so why do you want to be a police officer? Why this force? What's the third one?
It was about why it's important that a police force is representative of the community that it serves.
Yeah, so we're seeing an increasing amount of those questions being asked. So as opposed to just thinking about that, you could think about 3 elements: diversity, equality, and inclusion, and use some case studies, use some examples, and make it live like you've researched it. other popular questions at the moment, like West Yorkshire Police, do not ask any question that starts with, can you tell me about a specific time when you have. West Yorkshire Police's questions are all very values based. What values are important to police officers and why? What values are important to you? Tell me about a time when you've demonstrated one of those values. How would you deal with the situation when? Here's the situation, how would you deal with it? Durham Constabulary at the moment using 2 situational. One's about a mental health homeless person. The other one I think is around, is it inappropriate conduct? That's a popular one as well. How do you deal with a sergeant who made a sexist comment? So increasingly forces are starting to ask questions that are outside of that typical, can you tell me about a time when? Because it's really hard to BS someone who's asked you about what values are important to you. Actually, what value is important to you? Because if you just rattle off the competency and values framework, they're going to stop you and say, no, I didn't ask you to tell me all about the values and the competencies and the competency and values framework. I asked what value is important to you. Or if you try and rattle off the 9 principles in the code of ethics, because you've learnt them, that's not what's going to get you through. There's force out there, Sussex. I think it's Sussex. Do ask questions about code of ethics. What do you understand by the code of ethics? Why is it important? So there's so many more questions now that are being asked outside of that typical tell me about a time. And then there's other forces who don't really seem to care, like Avon and Somerset. Hey, come and join us, online assessment centre. We're not going to ask you any harder questions after that, other than what's your inside leg measurement? And here's the bleep test instructions. Do you understand? The answer is yes or no. That's the hardest question you'll get asked for Avon and Somerset. Whereas there's other forces like Durham and West Yorkshire and Lancashire who are really putting you through the mill in terms of your values to make sure you're the right sort of person. So it's all different, 50-something different ways of getting into the police. All right, so any questions, folks? Covered a fair bit there, haven't we? Any questions? Anyone got any little mini questions or anything where you've thought, I really have no idea what Brendan's talking about? No? All right, and so almost ends another weekly workshop, because you're all Bluelight community members, if any of you are thinking that course he talks about, here's a shameless plug, folks, come and join it, because it is awesome. I'm not just saying that. Go to Trustpilot. There's over 300 reviews there that are saying it's awesome. Actually, there's a few reviews who have given 1 star. 1 star. Invariably, they're the ones who wanted to use the money back guarantee, because I'm so confident in what I do works that I give you a money back guarantee. If you fail and you've done all the work I've asked you to do, then I'll give you a full refund. If within 24 hours of signing up, you're thinking it's not for me, this, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. But invariably the bad reviews are the ones where, I mean, one of the reviews, he said, I emailed you several times to say that I failed and you didn't give me a refund. What he actually said was one email that said, I'm not going any further in the process. And he didn't provide any evidence that he'd done any of the work whatsoever. That's why he didn't get a refund. So he gave me a 1-star review. Yeah, I can live with that. But anyway, send me a message, because you're a Bluelight community member. There's some big reductions for you in terms of the price. You don't do the website price. I'm going to go to Yen, because Yen's frantically waving a hand. Go on, Yen. You don't say something, ask me something.
Yes. So what do you think of Durham Constabulary and Northumbria? So what do you think of these 2 forces? And if I have to choose one, do you have any advice?
I thought you were going to be, I thought you'd settled on what you want. And actually, I know you haven't settled, but...
No. Yeah, but then, at some point I might join.
Yeah. No, have you had, by the way, have you not had the result yet?
No, next week.
Oh,
I had the results. Yeah.
Ah, right. But from what you said, it seems to have gone.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I think that should be the case. But, in long run, I'm still going to apply for the detective. program. So, but I would read. I mean, I've heard a lot of great things about Norpol, but not so much about Durham because surprisingly, I mean, I live in Durham, but I actually know more people in Norpol than Durham, and those in Durham that I know didn't say great things about them.
Really? Wow, that's interesting, because Durham used to be one of the toughest forces to get into, but that's when Mike Barton was the chief constable, because Mike Barton was probably one of the most enigmatic chief constables I've ever come across. He was awesome. He was eccentric, maverick. He was one of the best leaders in the police service. His force, Durham, was rated consistently excellent by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary year out. And I was going to say, and the people who worked there loved it. They loved working in Durham. So something's changed. I think he retired about 4 years ago.
Okay, so I don't think that is fair because according to the ranking, Durham force is still ranked really high above Northumbria. It's a much smaller force as well.
Yeah.
So and as I say that I don't really know that many people from, working in Durham police, but the one that I came across, just one, have told me so much, so many horrible things that really put me off from joining the police at all. So I just want to know, and also because I attended the recruitment event with Norpol, and one of the person who was giving the briefing, she was like telling us about, well, she used to work in Durham, and now she is working in Norpol, and she's like very high up as well. And she said that Norpol is a much better force in terms of.
I'll always say that. But no, actually, rule number one: never listen to anyone who's bitter and twisted about the police, no matter what force they work for.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
Never get advice from anyone who's bitter and twisted. Never get advice. If someone is bitter and twisted about being in the police, the best thing you can do is leave. If it's that bad, leave. So in terms of, we can always have another chat another time, because it's getting on a little bit, but because we will have a chat another time.
Okay.
Building on the work we've done already. But if you had a choice between the two, I'd probably go for Northumbria.
Why is that?
Because it's got better opportunities. It's a bigger force.
Yeah.
It's got better opportunities.
Yeah.
Easier. The pathway to things like promotion and specialist positions will be easier because it's a big force.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between working in inner city Newcastle and inner city Durham.
Yeah.
So I'll park that there for you. But we can always have a chat another time, Yen.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
I'm going to go to Marta now, who's got a hand up. So my eyes are a bit blurry. Is it Marta? It says Marta. Really small.
Question. What does it mean level 1 in competency and values? Are there different levels?
Yeah. Okay. So what's your next stage? What's the thing that you're preparing for?
I just done my Apollo first assessment.
So which force is this for?
Met.
The Met. So your next stage is the online assessment centre. This thing that's got all the different levels in it, just don't need it.
I will be contacting you for you. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. No.
Right. It's just going to confuse you, because the competencies have 3 different levels, but the values don't. And I can never get my head around that. The competencies have 3 different levels, because level 1 is the level of behaviour that they're looking for from a constable or a prospective constable. Level 2 is sergeant and inspector, and level 3 is sort of chief inspector and superintendent.
Okay.
So, but if you start trying to work out all the behaviours at level 1 and remember them all you're going to do is pickle your head. All you're going to do is confuse yourself. You're just going to get confused. As opposed to trying to learn all the competencies and the behaviours, what you've got next, Marcia, is the online assessment centre. Exactly as I talked about with Elise, just get good at answering the question in a structured, formulaic way, and you'll pass.
Okay, fingers crossed. Thank you.
The more you look at the competency and values framework, the more you're going to confuse yourself. Honestly, I've never seen anything, everything that comes out of the College of Policing always seems to be far more complicated than it needs to be. And I'm not just, you know, whilst I was in police training, I studied for a Master's in Education. As a practitioner, I've got practitioner assessor and quality assurance qualifications. I've got academic qualifications and personnel evaluation systems, Masters in Education. I worked for 2 years with Skills for Justice on their strategic steering group that was we needed to come up with a national occupational standards and a competency framework that could be used by the police. We never ever envisioned anything as complicated as this. That was in the year 2000, 2001. We never ever ever visioned anything as complicated as this. My vision was that it should be something on 2 pages and really simple for police officers to understand. Instead, we've got 20 pages worth, 18 pages worth of absolute gobbledygook. Do it the other way around. This is the question you're going to get asked. This is the structure you're going to utilize to deliver your answer. And these are the bullet points of the things that you need to be hitting. And that's how to pass it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, folks? No? All right. Awesome to see some of you again. Awesome to see some of you for the first time. Look forward to catching up with you either at one of the weekly workshops or one of the weekly webinars for my clients on the interview course or the online assessment center. Like I said, drop me a line. The price, there's a big difference anyway between what's on the website and what you get as a member of the Blue Light community. And like I said, if it's not for you within 24 hours, just let me know and you'll get a refund. And if you fail and you've done the work, you've got to do the work. I think that's a reasonable ask, isn't it? I'll show you the way, you do the hard work. I think that's quite a reasonable ask, and I think it's a pretty good guarantee, that one. You do the work that I show you to do and you still fail, you'll get a refund. But honestly, quite frankly, you do the work I show you to do, you're not going to fail the online assessment center. You can't, it's impossible. All right, folks, I shall catch up with you soon. Thanks for coming. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.